Hello, my name is Baruch and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the 57th episode of my video series on Old Testament 12-step recovery. We are going through the 12 steps and the 5 books of the Bible in order. Today we're going to do the 5th step as it relates to the book of Genesis. And stick with us. We're going to go through the entire 12 steps in Genesis, then we're going to do all 12 steps in Exodus, Leviticus, and so forth. So I want to focus today on Genesis 19:7, which says, "Flee for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountain, lest you be swept away." Now, what's going on here? This is God speaking. God is telling Lot and his family. Lot is with his wife and 2 of their daughters. And they are escaping from Sodom. God has destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, which were places of great evil, and Lot has been allowed to escape. He's been allowed to escape with his family. They're running away from the city, and it's difficult to picture, but some interpretations say it was some sort of fiery meteor storm or some terrible fire from heaven that destroyed these wicked cities. And you imagine these 4 people just running for their lives out on the plain, and there's a mountain that they're going to go. They're going to be safe if they can get to the mountain. And God tells them, don't look back. So Lot and his 2 daughters don't look back. They keep running. But Lot's wife, this is a very famous part of the Old Testament, Lot's wife turns around and looks. She can't help looking back. Maybe she's just curious to see the city she lived in being destroyed, but maybe she's also looking back, perhaps fondly, at her life there, and God punishes her by turning her into a pillar of salt. Now, I know that sounds a little bit strange, but that's what it says in the Bible, that Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt. And to me, there's a great lesson in recovery in this story, because you can look at it symbolically that the Sodom and Gomorrah represent us when we're using. And one of the things to understand about Sodom and Gomorrah, they're depicted, in fiction and in conversation as places of depraved behavior, places of utter insanity and criminality. But that is actually not accurate. Sodom and Gomorrah were law-abiding cities. They just had laws that were immoral. The law of Sodom and Gomorrah was, what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. And there shall never be any sharing of anything between 2 people. That's why, if you know the story of Lot, what happens is that 2 angels of God come to visit Lot. They're in the guise of human beings. They look like men, but they're angels. They come to visit Lot to tell him that the cities, that God is going to destroy the city because of its wickedness, but that he, Lot, because he has done some good things in his life, like caring for his uncle Abraham, he will be spared. What happens is that the citizens of and Lot invites them in for dinner. This is against the law in Sodom. You may not have strangers in for dinner. You may not give away your wealth to strangers in Sodom. It's punishable by death. And an angry mob of Sodomites come to kill these 2 strangers and to sexually abuse them with sodomy. That's where that phrase comes from. So that's what Sodom and Gomorrah were all about. It's the worshiping of selfishness. And that is, in a way, what addiction is. And so when Lot's wife looks back, she's looking back at this life she had where she got to keep everything that was hers and nobody could ever take it away from her. That was the law of the land. But that is also evil in the eyes of God. And so she could not live. And so she's turned into a pillar of salt. And what's interesting to me about that symbolically is that's kind of what happens if you don't get sober. You kind of freeze into a stone. You never change. You're just like a pillar of salt, of rock. You're an unchangeable object. You're not a person anymore. So that's a take on Genesis 19:7 from perspective of recovery in general. In terms of fifth step, here's the fifth step, right? And we all should know this. It's admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And, as I've been saying, I feel like I've been saying this every week now. All the steps are important, but this one is a big one, right? The fifth step is a very serious step. And it's really, if you know people who've been in recovery, if you've been in recovery for a while, if you sponsor people, you will know that the fifth step is where a lot of people fall apart in recovery. It's really hard. Because the fourth step is you have to make a list of your problems and mistakes and things that you've done in addiction that are bad or that you feel bad about, or people you've hurt, or other serious things that you've done. That alone is hard, to work up the nerve to be honest with yourself. But here you have to talk to somebody. And it's interesting. You have to talk to three different people, three different entities. You have to talk to God. All right, you have to admit what you've done to God. You have to admit it to yourself. That can be some of the hardest work you ever do. But I think what's often the most challenging is to tell another person what you've done. And usually it's your sponsor. It can be other people, though. And this is very understandable. This is human nature. It's like we all have our secrets and our special little problems that we feel embarrassed about or ashamed of. You feel guilty about something. The fifth step says you got to get it out in the open. Put it out in the light of day. And what's interesting, psychologically, even outside of recovery, people will tell you, letting something out, if you have something inside of you, something you did that you feel bad about, let it out into the light of day. It's somehow that disempowers this over you. I think we can all relate to this. Maybe there's something you did wrong in your life or in your addiction that you feel guilty about, and it's just eating you up. It's making you drink and use just so you won't have to think about it. Sometimes just admitting it, just owning it and getting it out there can be really helpful. So that's the fifth step. But there's a problem in doing this. There's a risk in the fifth step, and this, I've seen this in other people, I've seen it myself, is that in recounting what you've done, you're kind of intrigued. You're like, yeah, well, that was actually kind of fun. Yeah, we went to this party, we got really, really drunk, and I crashed the car, and I got arrested, and someone got hurt, but it was all just whatever. It was terrible, but it was sort of like a blast at the same time. I mean, that's such a classic alcoholic way of looking at things, and like I've been joking about this. I mean, I got sober in Los Angeles, and like a lot of fifth steps read like an action movie. It was like the cops were chasing us and this and that, and we escaped, and it was really a lot of fun. But of course, I was really drunk, and someone got killed. But there's this temptation to look back, like Lot's wife. You're going to look back at this event fondly. And so some recovery thoughts for the fifth step for Genesis based on this verse is, can you do a fifth step but avoid gazing back affectionately at your history of drinking and using, like Lot's wife? Because maybe you were given a chance, like Lot's wife, to escape death, nearly certain death. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is like using and drinking. It's going to kill you. But are you tempted to look back? So my suggestion for today is to avoid looking back fondly at your addict or your drinking experience. And anyway, if you like what you've been hearing here, I'd love for you to get the workbook. You can work on all these issues, pen and paper. People are getting a lot out of it. You can check it out at the link below. I look forward to having you with us on this journey.